Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
See? Yeah. How you doing?
All right. How are you?
Doing good.
Just doing good on this fine Sunday morning.
That's right. On this fine Sunday morning. Bright and early, the birds are singing. The sun is rising. Wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey.
What if the sun never rose?
Then we'd be cold.
True.
Is that, that's all you had for your thought?
That's what I've got for my thoughts.
That's great. Another episode in the books. Seth and I were in Salem last week, enjoying ourselves as we alluded to. And now we're not in Salem. We're back in the office. Producer Doug said, "Please invite me next time you go on a vacation." And we said, "Maybe." And he said, "Good enough." And that is most of the conversation we've had with Producer Doug since we've been back.
That's right. Beyond the him yelling at us to get back to work and to answer some listener feedback.
Yeah, that's right. And this episode is kind of listener feedback because it was a listener who wanted us to talk about this topic. But before we get into the topic of today's episode, we'll be talking about what we've recently played. So, Seth, why don't you go first? What have you been recently playing?
Recently, I've been playing a game that I believe we saw at PAX. Oh, I think it was actually during maybe Next Fest I saw it.
Next Fest, yeah. It's been a game that's been on my radar for a bit because I think we talked about it as our up and coming games that we want to play.
Could have been. Yes, I think. Did you talk about it as your?
I did, yeah.
Oh, and you haven't talked about it as a recently played yet.
I haven't bought any games really recently, so.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah. So the game that Zach and I are beating around the bush and talking about is Mouse PI for Hire, which was developed by Fummy Games and published by PlaySide. You play as Jack Pepper in a game where you play as essentially a mouse that's hand drawn, similar to a 1930s Mickey Mouse. And the game has the feel of playing in a hand-drawn cartoon from like the 30s, like an old school hand-drawn cartoon, complete with like any of the doors that you can walk through are always a different color than the ones that are part of the walls and stuff like that.
That's funny.
And all the like health bottles have like faces on them, and like even the bullets have little faces on them, and you do kind of extra animations when you're fighting, or when you're like standing around, you'll move your stuff around to be kind of like very cartoony. I'm thinking about like when you select your like mitts, your character kind of like adjusts his hands and stuff like that. I think one of the unique things in this game is the lockpicking game. So instead of having like a Skyrim lockpicking game or something like that, you use because you're a mouse, so you use your tail and you play like a game of Snake where you have to push your tail up against the tumblers in the lock so that you can engage the lock to open. And it's just kind of a unique take on the like lockpicking mechanic. It's a first person shooter. Yeah, it's like
it's a first person shooter.
No, but it's like a very like explosive kind of first person shooter. It's like over the top first person shooter. It's not like your traditional. It's not going to be like serious slow first person shooter. It's going to be like bombastic, kind of like all over the place kind of first person shooter.
Yeah.
And because it's in the cartoon world, things don't necessarily handle the same way they would in a traditional first person shooter. Like I was missing shots because the bullets kind of travel slow. So like you have to like lead your shots a little bit and all that. But yeah, so it's been a really good time. I've enjoyed playing the game. I really enjoyed the aesthetic. It feels like Cuphead if Cuphead was a first person shooter, or if it was bordering Mickey Mouse from the 30s, decided to be a private eye. But yeah, so that's Mouse PI for Hire. Came out earlier this year, April 16th of 26. And it's been a lot of fun so far.
Great. Well, I've been
also playing a first-person shooter.
I've also been playing a first-person shooter, though as opposed to a game that is cartoony, I've been playing a game that is seeped in realism. I've been playing Battlefield 1, developed in 2016 from DICE. Battlefield 1 is the 15th Battlefield game, not the first, but it's called Battlefield 1 because it is set in World War I. And it is a first-person shooter that is set during the time period of the Great War, and they have a short campaign as well as the multiplayer. I've been playing through the campaign. It is not super long from what I can tell, but I'm in the first kind of major chapter, which is called Through Mud and Blood, where you play as Daniel Edwards, a chauffeur who used to drive cars around for rich people, and now he drives tanks. The first major mission in the game is driving a tank as you have to go from point A to point B and blow up different artillery points and gun down Germans. Before the game actually gets into the campaign, there is kind of like a mini prologue of sorts where you play as different soldiers. And the way it works is that the game starts, it gives you a little description of events. It says, this game is based on true events, the World War I. And it says, you are now going to be in the front line of combat. You're not intended to survive. And it immediately throws you into a combat that is already well underway. The people have gone over the top. They're kind of storming a position, and you just immediately get gunned down, and then you spawn as another soldier who's in the same battle, and like the camera zooms out from your dead body and goes to the first person perspective of another soldier, and it just keeps doing that as your characters keep getting killed. And every time your character dies, it will say the character's name and how old they were. And it's a little grim, but it gives you kind of a good vibe for the tone of the game, which I do think does try to honor those that served in World War I. One thing I like is that when you do certain missions, you unlock things called codexes, which do give you some historic background to the things that you see in the game, such as explanations for like the way the tanks worked and stuff like that. One thing you'll notice when you're in the tank mission is one of the characters is insistent on keeping safe a pigeon that they keep in the tank, and they keep that pigeon in the tank because that is their only way to communicate with HQ. So they desperately need to keep the pigeon safe, and I think that's just kind of a nice little detail that they added into the game to kind of bring about the realism that the game is trying to preserve. So that's Battlefield 1, again, developed by DICE and released in 2016. I will also say I have been playing through multiplayer of Battlefront 2, the Star Wars game, and these games were built on the same engine, so sometimes I get a little confused because I'll be playing through Battlefield 1 being like, oh yeah, I gotta shoot all these soldiers, and then I'm like, I need to spawn in as a Jedi now, and then I can't do that because there are no Jedis in this game.
I do like that you play the game as a chauffeur. There's another game that starts where you're a chauffeur, and that's Mafia. So I like to think that in another world, Daniel Edwards would have joined the mob.
Getting into today's episode, where, as I alluded to earlier, we are doing a listener request from fan, friend, and supporter of the show, Sean. And this episode is going to be about a game that Sean suggested that we talk about because he said, "Hey Zach, have you guys done an episode on Crash Bandicoot?" And I said, "We've definitely done an episode on Crash Bandicoot." And he looked it up and he said, "No, you haven't." And I looked it up and said, "Oh, no, we haven't." And we've talked about Crash Bandicoot before, though, because we mentioned him in our Spyro episode. We mentioned him way back when we did our, iconic characters episode. We've alluded to Crash Bandicoot many, many times, but we've never done an episode on Crash Bandicoot, which I'm shocked because I thought we covered all like the major players in the field.
Ooh, not Crash. He's always forgotten about.
Before we get into the history of the game, I did want to talk a little bit about my memories. I remember first playing Crash Bandicoot. I think it was the first game at a friend's house. I remember really liking it. I found it to be kind of difficult. I wasn't really used to 3D games at the time, but I really enjoyed it. And at some point, we inherited a PS1 and a collection of games from a family friend. And we had Crash Bandicoot 2 as one of those games. But I don't think I ever beat that. I just remember playing through the opening stage over and over again. I think because I was bad at it. But what about you, Seth? Do you have any memories of Crash Bandicoot?
I think one of the few times that I've encountered Crash, I think I had some friends that owned it, but because it was primarily a solo play game, we didn't really play it since I was over their house, so we'd play multiplayer games. I did play it I believe at Toyworks or KB Toys, one of the toy companies that were frequent. I feel like because it was on PlayStation 1, maybe it was Toyworks. It was definitely like in one of those like consoles, like showing off the console displays that they used to have at the toy stores.
The CRT was really high up, so you had to like
crank
your neck back and
give
yourself a little whiplash.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it was at Toy Works. I feel like it was at the store that they were also selling a Virtual Boy. And I feel like not necessarily the same day, but like I feel like that structure of like the registers in the front and like leading out to the door in my brain, I feel like that's where the Crash Bandicoot was, up by the front. And that's kind of how I remember Toy Works.
If I remember Toy Works well, when you walk through the door, the register was kind of like off to the side, and then to the left of the register was where they sometimes had the console, because I think that's where I played Dreamcast for the first time. And then you had the toy aisles that went all the way back.
Yeah, the runs went backwards towards the back. But there was like a little lobby area in the front where they had all the new stuff and the registers. Yeah. That's how Toy Works was designed. See, I wasn't insane.
Well, to get into the history of Crash Bandicoot, the game Crash Bandicoot was developed by Naughty Dog, who were originally founded in 1984 as Jam Software. They were founded by Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, who were childhood friends who had met as preteens while at a weekend Hebrew school in their home state of Virginia. They created Jam with another friend named Mike Goyette, with the name Jam being an acronym for Jason, Andy, and Mike. Mike would quickly become disinterested in working on any video games. I should clarify, they founded this company in 1984. They were all born in 1970, so they were in fact 14-year-olds when they created this company. Now, Mike, being a 14-year-old child, became disinterested in the idea of running a company and working on games, and basically told Jason and Andy, I don't want to do this anymore. And Jason and Andy said, well, we have a company now, so we're going to buy out your share of the company. And they paid him $100 for his share of the company and reworked the acronym to Jason and Andy's Magic. They were around 15 when they sold their first game, Math Jam, in 1985. The game was designed for the Apple II and was an educational game where you solve math problems, and was made reportedly for a friend who was trying to tutor younger children at math and was having difficulty. So they decided, hey, what if we had like a game to make it easier to tutor children at math, and came up with this idea. They would copy their own discs on 5.25-inch floppies and stick them in Ziploc bags and began selling them to different schools. Schools were excited, and actually a few schools would buy the game. But soon, Andy and Jason ran into a problem. You see, when schools want to purchase something, they have a process to do that. And they, in fact, instructed Andy and Jason to not only get approval from different psychologists, but they also had to have approval from at least 16 different teachers and obtain references from other school districts. And they said no, so they just gave the game away for free. Instead of selling it. Now, as of the recording of this episode, Math Jam is completely lost media. The only existing piece of media for it is the sleeve it was sold in and a photocopy of the disc with the instructions, but the game is otherwise completely lost. It is on the Lost Media Wiki, and a bunch of people on Reddit will occasionally pop up and say, hey, anyone got a copy of Math Jam? And people will quickly remind them, no one has a copy of Math Jam. It is in fact missing. So if you have a copy of Math Jam because you happen to be a school in that time period and you purchased a copy from a child, let us know, and maybe we could find a way to back it up for you.
Where were they located?
I think Virginia. I know they went to college at MIT, so they're briefly in Massachusetts. But
when did they sell? They were 15. They weren't going to college at 15 at MIT.
I don't know that. They could have been. They were living in. Yeah, they were in Virginia.
They replaced Mike with Magic. I'm assuming that they weren't in MIT when they were 15.
That's true. They were in McLean, Virginia. Yeah, it's an unincorporated community.
Let's go on a trip. We'll go down to McLean, Virginia, and we'll go to all the local schools, and we will say, "Can we go into your archives? Because we're looking for Math Jam."
Because we're looking for Math Jam. And the school will say, who are you?
They'll say, you need to leave the premise. And we'll say, we're here for Math Jam.
Yeah, we'll pull out our like Classic Gaming Brothers IDs. It'll say Classic Gaming Brother Investigation Squad.
Yeah, we're private investigators hired to look for Math Jam. So we need to go into Yeah. We need to go into your records. I bet there's a bunch of Math Jam in the Virginia dump.
Now, Andy and Jason's next game would be a game called Ski Crazed, which was, as the name implies, a skiing game. And it would be the first game that they actually had a proper publisher connected to it. To avoid the issues they encountered with getting Math Jam sold, they opted to create a game that wasn't educational and that they weren't going to sell to schools. They said that was too much of a process. Let's just do something easier, because if you want to just sell directly to people, you don't need to go through as much of a rigmarole. So they decided to develop a entertainment game, which at the time they called Ski Stud, but the name would be changed later. Gavin initially coded the game entirely in BASIC, but because BASIC is generally a bit slow with action games, he ended up refining the code using assembly language to make the game run better.
They had originally planned to self-publish the game and sell it locally, but decided to approach a small publisher called Vaudeville. Vaudeville offered to publish the game and purchase the rights for $250, which would be about $750 today. The game was originally titled Ski Stud, but Vaudeville would change the name to Ski Crazed and release it in October of 1987. The game would sell around 1,500 copies, and Jam Software made around $1,500, which is $4,500 today. Jason and Andy would use the money to buy a second disk drive for their computer so they can churn out games even faster. In fact, a second disk drive would be double.
That's right.
Both Andy and Jason continued to work with Vaudeville on their next game, Dream Zone. But by 1989, they would shift to a new publisher, Electronic Arts, for the game Keef the Thief. What's funny is I didn't see the Keef the part of this, so I just thought they were the developers of Thief, and I was like, damn.
Yeah, they jumped into this. They went from Ski Craze to Thief.
They would change their name from Jam to a company known as Naughty Dog Software. After developing a game for the 3DO, Way of the Warrior, in 1994, the team signed on with Universal Interactive Studios to produce 3 games. They had a few ideas for games, including potentially a 3D fighting game. However, they realized that there weren't any 3D platformers at that point and decided they could make one similar to Donkey Kong Country. During the early development, they referred to the project as Sonic's Ass Game. Sounds like a fun game that Zach would be interested in.
Yeah, I'll pick up a copy of Sonic's Ass Game.
You would. Production began on the game after the team moved to their new offices in Los Angeles, California. And while in the parking lot at Universal Interactive, the team met Taylor Kurowski, a visual effects artist on Sequest DSV. He was then hired as a Naughty Dog employee after speaking to the team and talking about his work. Good for him. He's just like, hey. And they were like, hey, we're not called Jam anymore, so we can hire people with names other than Mike.
It was decided that they would develop a game for the PlayStation, due to the fact that the other powerful systems at the time, the Jaguar, the Sega Saturn, the 3DO, all these game systems were selling really badly. So they wanted to make sure that they could have a game that used good hardware, but also would sell. And the team noted that Sony didn't really have a mascot, so they would begin talking directly to Sony and would finalize a developer agreement with the company, and the development was then set at a budget of $1.7 million. When it came to deciding an animal for the main character, they wanted something that was both appealing and a bit unusual. They looked at Sonic the Hedgehog with Sega, they looked at the Tasmanian Devil with Warner Brothers, and they said, hey, we kind of want to have a wacky mammal. So they considered a few different wacky mammals. They considered the wombat, the potoroo, and the bandicoot, with a temporary name for the game even being Willy the Wombat. It was decided, though, to make the character a bandicoot, and they would choose the name Crash for the character. Now, some initial designs for Crash as a character came from Charles Zimbillis, who designed him as a squat character who appears kind of hunched over. Another designer, Joe Pearson, would come up with a more slender design. Zimbillis would then combine his design with Pearson's design to get what we know as the final design for Crash. For a villain, Jason was inspired by the show Pinky and the Brain. He was a big fan of that show, so he wanted to create a villain that had a very large head. And he immediately, along with Andy, decided on the name Dr. Neocortex, as they thought that was the perfect name for a villain. When it came to actually designing Neocortex, they described Cortex to Zimbillis as having, quote-unquote, huge head but a tiny body. He's a mad scientist scientist, and he dresses a bit like a Nazi from the Jetsons, which, yeah, that's a bit what Neocortex kind of looks like. They also wanted the character to be a bit of a meta-commentary on cliches in video games, but would end up nixing this idea completely as they wanted to avoid having cutscenes in the game as they felt it slowed down the pacing.
The character of Aku Aku, who is a floating tiki head, was inspired by a Polynesian restaurant that used to be located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, next to the Alewife station that had a large tiki head near the door. Sadly, this restaurant is no longer called the Aku Aku and is instead called the Summer Shack. Have you been to the Summer Shack, Zach?
No, I haven't been to the Summer Shack because it always looks sad on the outside.
Oh, well, maybe they'll go the way of the Aku Aku. The Summer Shack still has one of the tiki heads that the Aku Aku had out front, though they repainted it as a sea captain. So it is a sea captain tiki head. The Aku Aku masks were also a relatively late addition, as they wanted to add a translucent shield, but needed a low polygon alternative that looked good. The game itself was built on Silicon Graphics workstations rather than the more standard PCs that were used at the time. The PlayStation lacked polygon clipping and texture correction, so the programmers would emphasize polygon count over textures in designing the graphics for the game. The animation was done with vertex animation to give the game a more cartoon vibe to it. This also allowed for characters to have an incredibly wide array of facial expressions. Crash's model, in fact, would be made up of 532 polygons in total, which is a decent amount of polygons.
Yeah, especially for the 1990s.
Yeah, they do have like really intense faces and expressions going on.
Yeah, there's that meme of Crash going like, wow, and it's like, he's just like, his whole face just stretches.
Yeah.
Music of the game was done fairly late in development, with it only being added just before the game's showing at E3. Game producer David Siller reportedly brought in a music production company called Mutado Musica without consultation from Naughty Dog, and was ultimately removed from the project after a confrontation between Andy and David. The music would end up being composed by Josh Mansell, who created some manic sounding songs at first, but was directed to make the sound more ambient. He did so, but Universal hated it, so he went back to the drawing board and finally came up with a sound that everyone liked, which also he felt fit the animation style. We'll play some of the music here. To market the game, Andy Gavin and Taylor Kurosaki put together a 2-minute demo film to show Sony. Sony really liked the film, but due to internal policies, they couldn't guarantee an agreement with Universal until March of 1996. In 1996, there was some drama prior to E3. Universal reportedly attempted to take full credit for Crash Bandicoot and notified Naughty Dog that they were not allowed to attend the conference. So Universal was going to be at the conference, but they said to Naughty Dog, we don't want any of you guys there. Please do not show up. They also mocked up temporary box art that did not include any Naughty Dog logos. And this not only made everyone at Naughty Dog upset, it actually violated the contract that they had signed with Universal at the beginning when they were told that they were going to make 3 games for Universal. Jason was frustrated and would draft out 1,000 copies of a document that just said Naughty Dog creator and developer of Crash Bandicoot. And he planned to hand out these documents to everyone at E3 that came to the Universal booth. So basically, if someone came to the Universal booth and saw all the artwork that didn't have Naughty Dog logos on them, Jason would be there and he would just hand them a letter that just said, we made this game. He then took those 1,000 copies and sent them to Universal for review and reportedly caused the head of Universal Interactive to go into Andy's office and begin screaming at him. So, little drama, but eventually they did make it to E3.
The rest of the show would actually go very well for the game, with Sony ending up replacing Twisted Metal for Crash Bandicoot at their booth. The game would finally be released in September of 1996 in North America, and in Europe in November of 1996. The game would later release in Japan in December of 1996, though not without some changes for the Japanese market. Sony's producer, Shuhei Yoshida, was concerned that the game was too difficult for the Japanese audience and suggested the game be made easier. Naughty Dog would make the Japanese version easier by shortening certain levels and adding in moments of Aku Aku explaining the game mechanics. Some of the music would also be changed. There is a television commercial out there that was made featuring a costume performer as Crash Bandicoot, dancing to a song that would become the opening theme to future Crash Bandicoot games in Japan, which we will sample for you here. I wonder if I was Naughty Dog and Japan was like, Sony was like, I think the game is too difficult. If I would have just been like, we'll make some changes. Then just send it over and be like, it's done. The end of the game's easier.
Now, in terms of gameplay and the story of Crash Bandicoot is fairly straightforward. The game takes place on an archipelago west of Tasmania, where Dr. Neocortex, a mad scientist, plans to genetically alter the animals of the island to create a super soldier army. One of these animals is a bandicoot named Crash, who gets rejected by the device that Neocortex is using to brainwash his new super soldiers because Crash has fallen in love with a female bandicoot named Tawna. Crash is cast into the ocean, but lives, and is then sent on a quest to save Tawna from Dr. Neocortex. The gameplay is also fairly straightforward. You run forward through most of the early part of the game in a third-person perspective. You jump over various obstacles, avoid different enemies. Crash can attack by jumping on enemies or spinning. Occasionally, the level perspective will change to a traditional side-scrolling view. Along the way, you collect Wump Fruit, which adds to your score. Collecting 100 Wump Fruit gives you an extra life. There are also various crates you smash. Some will give you the Aku Aku mask, which will temporarily protect you. If you clear a level without dying and smashing all the crates, you'll earn a gem. Earn 26 gems and you unlock a secret epilogue. Now, Seth, how did the game do?
Crash Bandicoot was a commercial powerhouse on release. It became the second highest rented PlayStation title for Blockbuster Video in its opening month, and would go on to sell over 1 million units by the end of 1996, and became the fourth best-selling PlayStation game in the United States in 1996. By 1997, it stayed in the top 10 spot for best-selling games, and by 1998, its sales had reached 1.5 million units in the United States alone, with sales reaching 610,000 in Japan, 725,000 in Europe. By 2003, Crash Bandicoot had sold 6.8 million units worldwide, making it the 10th best-selling PlayStation game of all time, just behind Metal Gear Solid. Later games, Crash Bandicoot Warped and Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, would take the 8th and 7th best-selling spots respectively. The game was very well received as well. Computer and Video Games gave it a 4 out of 5, EGM gave it a 33.5 out of 40, Game Informer gave it a 9 out of 10, and PlayStation Pro gave it a 9 out of 10. Critics praised the graphics, the gameplay, and the audio. Some criticism was lobbed towards the fixed camera, which gave some players difficulty with jumps, but overall critics liked how the game moved and the variety in gameplay. It really was just fun gameplay. It's just the game is we talk about that where games sometimes are story is better than gameplay is better than story. Crash is definitely let's just go all in on gameplay and call it a day.
Yeah. Now, in terms of its legacy, Crash Bandicoot would spawn a best-selling franchise. The sequels Crash Bandicoot 2 and Crash Bandicoot Warped, as we mentioned, were both bestsellers for the PlayStation. In 1999, a kart racing spin-off called Crash Team Racing was released. This was followed up by a party game called Crash Bash in 2000, which was one of the first of the Crash Bandicoot games not to be developed by Naughty Dog. A fourth main game was developed by Traveler's Tales in 2001 called Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex, which would sell around 1.5 million copies in North America. A Game Boy Advance game, The Huge Adventure, was developed by Vicarious Visions in 2002. This would be followed up by Entranced in 2003. Also in 2003, Vicarious Visions would produce another kart game, Crash Nitro Kart, and in 2004, they released two games that were part of a crossover with Spyro the Dragon. These would be Crash Bandicoot Purple, Ripto's Rage, and Spyro Orange, The Cortex Conspiracy. Traveler's Tales would develop the next game, also released in 2004, called Crash Twinsanity. A third kart racing game, Crash Tag Team Racing, was developed by Radical Entertainment the next year. In 2006, Dimps would release Crash Boom Bang for the Nintendo DS, a party game that is inspired by various different board games. Then, in 2007, there was an attempted reboot of sorts with Crash of the Titans from Radical Entertainment, which featured the characters redesigned as well as some reworked gameplay. A sequel, Mind Over Mutant, would be released in 2008 and would be the last Crash Bandicoot game for major consoles until 2017.
In 2017, Vicarious Visions would remaster the first three Crash Bandicoot games for the Crash Bandicoot Edsane trilogy. This remastered was generally positively received. In 2019, Beenox would release a remastered version of Crash Team Racing called Crash Team Racing Nitro Fuel old. In 2020, Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, was released from Toys for Bob. This would be the 8th main installment in the series, but picks up after the events of the 3rd game. In 2023, Toys for Bob would release the most recent of the games, Crash Team Rumble, which is an online multiplayer game which ultimately received mixed reviews and was the last game by Toys for Bob before they became an independent studio. Beyond those games, Crash Bandicoot is featured as a playable minigame in Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, also by Naughty Dog. The character has also appeared in Skylanders. Outside the game, the character has been parodied on The Simpsons. The game Crash Bandicoot Warped was a central plot point to an episode of the TV show Felicity, and in 2014, an extinct Bandicoot species was named Crash Bandicoot. Man, Felicity, I always get confused with Felicity and that show that was a spinoff of Buffy.
Angel?
I always think that Felicity is part of that Buffy crowd.
Oh, yeah. I think Felicity is just a drama show. Like, I don't think it's...
Yeah.
It wasn't like Supernatural.
No, I know. I would be disappointed if I booted that thing up and was like, all right, let's see some vampire killing, and then they were just like doing regular drama stuff.
That will do it for our Crash Bandicoot episode. Before we get into our retro rewinds, just my usual ending spiel. I think Crash is a great game. I love Crash Bandicoot. I think the Insane Trilogy was a fantastic remaster, and I definitely want to revisit it. I haven't played it in some time, but I think Crash and Spyro were always two of my favorite of the PlayStation games. I remember playing them a lot at one of my friend's house, so I think there was always a game that has a soft spot in my heart. Seth, do you have any final thoughts on Crash Bandicoot?
No. I hope that our listener, Sean, enjoyed it.
Yeah, hope so too. Now, to get into our retro rewind, Seth had me play Conquests of the Longbow, The Legend of Robin Hood for MS-DOS. Developed by Sierra Online, it's the second and last game of the Conquest series. You play as Robin Hood, who is on a quest to restore King Richard I to his throne and to not get killed by the Sheriff of Nottingham. The game shares similarities to other Sierra adventure games, to the point where it's sometimes hard for me to distinguish between Sierra adventure games because they are very similar, both in their colorful graphics but also in the point-and-click gameplay elements. I will say that Conquest of the Longbow does have kind of the upper hand as being a Robin Hood inspired game, so a lot of its elements are more medieval themed, more of like Robin Hood style medieval themed versus like fantasy. I sometimes find Sierra games kind of all blend together in my head. I know that they are all very different, but sometimes it's just kind of like a mesh. One thing that I do know is that Conquest of the Longbow does have mini games, which are always fun to see in an adventure game. They're always a nice change of pace. I'm sure there are a ton that do have mini games, but off the top of my head, I feel like a lot of the adventure games that I've played either don't have mini games or the mini games are such a small portion to the game that they're not really worth noting. But in Conquest of the Longbow, there's like an archery mini game. There's like a board game thing that you can play. So there's some fun stuff that you can do. Overall, it's a good game. I liked it. I think it holds up. It's a little weird at times, but that's always fun. Next week, Seth, you can play Balance of Power for MS-DOS.
Great, thank you. Zach had me play Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel, developed by Iguano Entertainment and published by Sunsoft. Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel, also known as Zero High Flying Squirrel in Japan, was released in 1994 for the Sega Genesis and SNES, and in 1995 in PAL regions for the Mega Drive. You play as Zero, who is the rival to Arrow, which starts with an A and Zero starts with a Z, so he's the opposite of Arrow. And Arrow's from Arrow the Acrobat, which is a game that I had Zach play a couple of episodes ago. And just like how I'm Zach's rival in the classic Gaming Brothers, Arrow and Zero are rivals to each other. In the game, you play as Zero, and who is a kamikaze squirrel. You can shoot, dive bomb, and swoop upwards. I feel like in this particular game, there's way too much going on, and that the complexity for me is its downfall, because you have like so many different buttons, combinations, and stuff like that. It does not come off as a simple platformer, and it looks good. And at the time that it was released, it had some really bright and like colorful graphics that were like really pushing the Genesis to its limits. But there were some critical reviews in All Game and Power Unlimited who both said that the controls were pretty difficult, and coupled with the level design, it just didn't make the game a lot of fun. So I would agree with that. I think that the game is overly overly difficult and complicated for what it is, and does not hold up. Next week, Zach, you can play 1080 snowboarding for N64.
Great, I will. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for today's episode. If you have any memories of playing Crash Bandicoot, be sure to email us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found, be it Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on our website, classicgamingbrothers.com. We're available on social media. Look us up, Classic Gaming Brothers, CG Brothers Pod. We're available on Twitch. Look us up. We're available on Patreon. Be sure to support us. And we're also available on YouTube. Like and subscribe. With that, Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
Right.